Okay, next up, we're going to talk to VMRay. VMRay makes an online binary analyzer. You take a sample, you upload it, VMRay blows it up in its VM, which they say is very good at avoiding being detected by the malware that you're blowing up in their VM, and then it'll spit out a bunch of tuned analysis for you. Unlike Virus Total Intelligence, or Virus Total generally, which is a great tool, don't get me wrong, but unlike VT, it won't actually share file hashes of stuff you submit, so you don't have to worry about alerting attackers to the fact that you're analyzing their malware, which can be an issue for some organizations, particularly in high security environments. VMRay was founded on the back of the founder's PhD, and their office is actually over the road from a German university. And they have a lot of to and fro back from the uni. They have 45 staff now, and I have to say that when I first announced I was going to be doing some, marketing, because that's what this is. When I first announced that I was going to be doing some marketing for VMRay, I was on the receiving end of a bunch of tweets saying how great their stuff is. Now, I have no idea myself because I don't work in DFIR, but I guess what I'm saying is that they're a popular bunch of people. So that's always a nice thing. It's always an encouraging sign. Anyway, we did a sponsor interview last year with a VMRay customer in one of the weekly shows, but since then they've done a major update. They're up to version 2.2 of their platform, which has included huge changes to the UI. VMRay's sales and marketing chief, Chad Loeven, joined me to talk about VMRay and its new version. And don't worry about the sales guy title, by the way, because Chad speaks human. And here's what he had to say.
First of all, the name is derived from the idea of, a virtual machine and an X-ray. So we're about, giving that X-ray, that deep inspection and analysis of what's going on inside, a virtual target machine. How that translates into a product is we're effectively a sort of a malware analysis or network sandbox. And we've built around that core technology a slew of additional tools and interfaces to really facilitate the work of, a DFIR, digital forensics and incident response specialist. Or, alternately, in very high volume applications, we have a lot of technology companies that license our technology to embed our dynamic analysis as part of their overall security suite. Some of which are public, like SonicWall, for example, leverages VMRay as part of their Capture ATP service for their firewall customers.
That's interesting. I didn't actually realize you were doing things at volume. I figured most of it was going to be people doing detailed analysis of, funny binaries that they've come across.
Yeah, well, we tend to talk, of course, more towards our own end users, but there's definitely, quite a sizable business for us, in terms of, other people leveraging that technology. Some we can talk about, some we can't, but it's all basically where, they plug in VMRay to fill that, gap in analysis or visibility in their own product line.
Yeah, so why don't we talk about the use case for an end user, because the licensed use at volume is kind of an extension of that, really. I think it's much more interesting to talk about what it looks like when a human being is submitting something to VMRay. What does that look like? What does that process look like, and why would you need VMRay?
Yeah, well, we've put a lot of work in, especially with the 2.2 release, to make it a lot more user friendly. We come from a very strong academic background. The two co-founders both built VMRay based on their PhD work in dynamic binary analysis and have an extensive academic history in that field. And so, certainly, going from an academic proof or technology to a commercial product is it's not a straightforward path. And one of the things that we've spent a lot of time and effort on in the last couple of years is really making it more accessible and friendly, so that you don't have to be a PhD or an experienced incident responder to use VMRay. So we have customers, they've got their entire cert team around the world logging into VMRay, submitting samples that they find or they get fit in from different sources, analyzing, and then escalating to where they most need to act on it. Some of that's manual, just going in through the web interface, and some of that, of course, is automated through connectors. There's a lot of talk in the industry now about SecOps, especially with Splunk buying Phantom. So we've also put a lot of effort in the last couple of years in building out those connectors to those SecOps automations tools, and really trying to make it a seamless as possible process, whether you're coming in as a tier 1 analyst and submitting, or whether it's all just through the API and the connector.
Now, one thing I find interesting about this is, there's a clear difference between submitting something to VMRay or versus submitting something to VirusTotal, which is that you don't share any of the information based on submitted samples. So if you're dealing with an attacker that might be waiting for file hashes for its tools to pop up hidden in VirusTotal, this is definitely a better option. that is a small set of people who are going to be worried about that particular problem, but there's not too many other online tools that'll do that for you.
Certainly, there's a core subset of customers who are extremely concerned about that. But certainly, it comes up a lot more often these days. For those of you that are familiar with that, GDPR, and I think everyone these days is being affected by those regulations in Europe. Everyone's a lot more conscious now of the risks of data sharing, and even outside of GDPR, there's certainly been plenty of examples where confidential company documents get uploaded to VirusTotal, and before you know it, there it is. That spreadsheet is there for the whole world to see. So we've definitely sensed a lot more visibility.
That's really interesting that you highlight GDPR as a driver, because it is one of those things where that's kind of almost an unintended consequence of a law like that, right? Very good for you, but I wouldn't have thought of that as a driver, but it makes total sense.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and we're seeing that everyone is affected basically, because unless you absolutely never do business with anyone in Europe, which is really the case in our industry, it's a global industry, we're all affected by it. And I think that gives us a bit of a leg up, with our history, being built around, European privacy regulations and German, especially privacy regulations, which have always been very, very strict. We've understood from day one, the importance of keeping your information to you and minimizing that spillover or exchange where it isn't necessarily needed, and this, you can still get the results you need and the response you need without sending that spreadsheet out to the entire world.
Now, last year, as part of VMRay's marketing, you actually booked a weekly episode of Risky Business, and instead of getting one of your own staff onto the show, you had one of your users come on to just sort of walk people through the workflow and what you use it for. And, it was Koen van Impe, who gave us a really nice rundown of how you'd actually use VMRay, submit a sample, what sort of output you get back, how verbose is it, how well tuned is it on the flip side of that, et cetera, et cetera. But you've been working really hard and just done this major new release, which you mentioned earlier, version 2.2. Can you tell us exactly what's new? Like, what have you changed?
Yeah, well, the most important change was really around the usability. We've always had from the very beginning, and I should add, by the way, this is the second go with myself and the two co-founders at a commercial malware analysis product. We did the first one 10 years ago. We sold that one, and so really, the whole genesis of VMRay was to overcome some of the limitations and the obstacles that first generation of technology, and we definitely succeeded with the core technology. But as I mentioned earlier, we had a lot of work to do to make it more accessible, especially for more junior analysts. And so that's really what we've done with 2.2 is allow a more broader range of more junior analysts who aren't necessarily people with 5 years of reverse engineering experience to know how to get a meaningful result out and get some actionable information out. So a lot of effort on the usability of it, a lot of enhancements around, we incorporate threat intel, so we're ingesting a lot of information. You mentioned VirusTotal, of course. We make that an optional integration, but we certainly have no problem if customers want to incorporate VirusTotal or OpSWAT MetaDefender results, because that's all complementary to the dynamic analysis, of course, where we're going to show you what that thing would have done if it executed on your desktop, and then we're layering around it all the metadata, if you like, about what else you need to know about, where was that URL first seen that it tried to communicate with, what is the reputation of that URL, what's the whois info, all that kind of stuff is wrapped around to really make it a one-stop shop, if you like, on from every aspect of what is this thing and what did it do, and what kind of damage
it really comes
it
down to the UI enhancements and a big thing is integration, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we certainly see both more demand for, quality threat intel, and as you know, there's a lot of, let's call it snake oil, where there's a lot of threat data out there masquerading as threat intel. So we've definitely put a lot of effort into making sure that we're incorporating meaningful information related to what you're trying to analyze, and then presenting that in a very actionable way. So it's very easy for you to see, all right, this thing did that, and then it did that, and I need to worry about this if I see that somewhere else on one of my other endpoints. And that's really the guiding philosophy of this release.
You did mention, though, that you're licensing this technology now to vendors. One of them you named was SonicWall. Are they using it just to do file scoring, or is this something that's being used by their people to do manual analysis, or is this all automated high-volume stuff? How are they using it? Because there's a lot of vendors who are listening to this, and I'm guessing some of them might be interested in what you got to offer.
Yeah, no. SonicWall is absolutely an entirely automated case. The difference is that in the automated case, I mean, you're extracting the IOCs, you're absolutely scoring the file, but we're going to be scoring it in a much more verbose way that gives you a much more accurate set of representations of, what did this thing really do? One of the things we put a lot of effort in really from the beginning, and really the underlying concept of VMRay is how do we make this thing invisible to malware? How do we convince malware that it is actually executing on its intended target machines? So please show us the behavior that you would show if you were wreaking havoc on the customer's desktops or servers. And that's really one of the key value propositions that we have, is that we really do not present any attack surface in the target machine for the malware to hook onto and raise its hand and say, hey, I got you. I know I'm being analyzed.
So how do you actually do that? How do you actually stay opaque? I mean, it's always going to be an arms race, right? But what's the secret sauce? Is there any one trick that you speak about publicly?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really, based on our previous experience, where we had, a sort of cuckoo-like sandbox, where we had a sort of a hook that we injected in the target machine. And, we tried to hide that hook from the malware authors. And you really can't at the end of the day. As soon as you're modifying that target machine, you have an attack surface. They're going to find it. And, they're going to say, you know what, I'm out of here. So with our technology, we don't modify the target machine at all. So you can basically drag over your gold images and those become your target machines. And so the beauty of that approach is, the malware really, cannot identify some artifact and say definitively, you know what, I know I'm being analyzed. So that's the beauty of the approach. There's a lot more to it, of course, but that's the essence of it, that, we're able to replicate for the malware exactly, what it wants to see. So I like to use the analogy of the Matrix, of course. We built a better Matrix, and if the malware is Keanu Reeves, Keanu isn't going to see Agent Smith walking around there. There's no glitch in the Matrix with us.
All right, well, Chad Loeven, thank you very much for joining us on Snake Oilers to walk us through VMRay's stuff. And look, I wish you all the best with it.
All right, thanks very much, Patrick.
That was Chad Loeven there of VMRay, and you can get a 30-day free trial of VMRay's gear. I've linked through to the URL in the show notes. And you know what? If you work in DFIR, why not just go and register, throw a sample at it, and see what the output looks like. If you do that, and if you do that, let me know how you went. I'm always interested in feedback about a sponsor's technology. So yeah, let me know.